Hello and welcome to YouMatter. Hello and welcome to session 42. So in this episode, the subject matter, I guess, is quality improvement, which might spark the fear of God into some of you. The idea of being audited perhaps comes to mind, or being watched or checked. But have a listen. I think you might change your view slightly when you listen to Jo Kitchen, who is involved in an organisation. She's a network facilitator for allied health professionals and quality improvement. And she presents quality improvement in its sort of most basic form, just trying to make our services better. I think you might be very sort of positively surprised by her experience and her description of quality improvement. Anyway, have a listen to the podcast, see what you think, and I'll be back at the end. So hello and welcome to session 42 of YouMatter, where I'm delighted that my guest for this episode is physiotherapist Jo Kitchen. Welcome to the podcast, Jo.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. So Jo was originally a neurophysiotherapist, but in recent years she's moved to Newquay in Cornwall, and she's taken a little bit of a change of direction in part of her career. So Jo works as a network facilitator for allied health professionals and quality improvement. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about what that is for starters. So Jo, could you just fill us in a little bit more as to what that role is and what it entails for you personally?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few years ago, there were individual AHPs who were interested in quality improvement, and they found that the training for people interested in quality improvement or people wanting to improve in that area was there was massive variations between different areas of the country and maybe what trust you worked for. And they felt that this was quite an exciting area of improving care that we can offer for our patients and the way that we can work in teams as well. And it was something that AHPs should be able to get involved in and should be able to support each other in. So they started connecting, they started forming a network, and it started to grow quite quickly. So then they had some funding via the Q community, which is part of Health Foundation, to put together a conference, and I think there's maybe some roadshow events. But then COVID happens, and like for many of us, they had to pivot and adapt. So they moved, they'd been heading towards doing a lot of their work online anyway, but they moved towards online events and an online conference. And then they still had some funds left over, and they thought what would really help the network is a network facilitator, so someone who has it as part of their paid role to be able to help connect the members, and to be able to support the network in growing and also evaluating itself, and seeing how we can move forward. Because like lots of networks, the membership is voluntary, people are doing it as well as their usual day jobs, and everyone has busy spells, and sometimes it's hard to keep things going well during those more difficult spells. So that was how the role came about, and I started it in February this year.
Yeah. So Jo, we had a little chat about this off air, didn't we, last week? You were saying that you're quite aware that the term quality improvement can trigger a little bit of nervousness in people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as physios, when I look back on my own training, we did a little bit of audits. So
Mm.
the classic notes audit was something that you maybe do as a student or as a Band 5 physio. And we're definitely always looking at how we can improve services. And maybe we did a little of PDSA cycles, Plan, Study, Act, Do. But that was about it, really. And So it's an area that when we start thinking about, oh, what is quality improvement? Is this somebody who's going to come from outside and assess the quality of my care or the quality of maybe our team? Because we think of quality assurance, where someone comes in and looks at
Mm.
a series of tick boxes and you either have a quality service or you don't. But actually, quality improvement is more about a way of thinking to be able to ask really good questions to understand the problems and why those problems have happened. And then there's a toolkit of different resources, different ways of approaching these things to be able to try and make change that is the change that's needed
Mm.
and change that works as well and is sustainable over a longer term. Because as physios, I think we're often quite quick to jump in and be like, I see the problem, I know what we're going to do to solve it, and like me as an individual is going to go in there, tell everyone this is the new thing we should be doing, or the new exciting treatment technique that is now the best option for back pain, and that's what we're going to do. Whereas quality improvement is a bit more about asking those why questions. Why have we come to where we are at the moment? Are we asking our patients? Are we asking our service users? Are we asking all the members of staff for their input? And then really framing the problem and then starting to look at solutions. And the solutions might not necessarily be the ones that are one of the possibilities at the beginning. It's about being open to the things that you find along the way to craft the best response for your particular problem in your particular community.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Joe, that point about physio seeing the problem, wanting to be the fix. And yeah, I smiled when you said, and I, as an individual, I'm going to be the one to solve it. Um, do you think that hinders us, that personality trait, in terms of finding solutions to these bigger problems?
Um, Ultimately, no, I don't think it does, because I think whatever problems you're coming across, it takes quite a lot of effort and energy to tackle those. And so I think that drive and that really wanting to keep improving the care that we offer patients is really important and is really valuable. But I do think if maybe I had had some more training on how to carry out improvement work, the things I have tried to do in the past might have been more successful. So
Mm.
even the idea of, say, you might call it stakeholder mapping, which is thinking who are all the people who have a say in this piece of work or this thing that's happening, and are they all on board, from the patients to maybe whatever exec team you've got, or your own managers or the people in the team next to you, and maybe even just sitting down and jotting that out in a bit of a diagram
Mm.
and then going and talking to all of those people before getting going with the project. Those sorts of ideas, I think, would have been really valuable. And I think maybe it's what makes us as physios and AHPs really interested in the quality improvement methodology and tools, because this is stuff we're trying to do anyway. And oh, here are some things that can help us along the way.
Mm. Yeah, I think you're right in that we have a natural disposition to want to try and improve things, whether that's a patient's personal situation, or the way a service is being delivered, or maybe even how the staff room is laid out. That is a sort of a common trait of physios, isn't it, to see something and just always want to make it better. But yeah, I think also we generally describe ourselves as team players, but then there is this very strong trait to tend to do things on an individual sort of format. And I wonder, I'm sure it's a whole raft of things behind that. But off the top of my head, I'm wondering whether we're quite capable people, and quite often we'll back ourselves and trust ourselves to be able to find a solution. But I wonder if there's another side as well where we struggle to ask for help. We sort of think, oh, well, I could just probably manage this myself and just get on with it. I don't need to bother other people.
Yeah, I think that could definitely be it. Yeah, the feeling of we've got to be able to carry this on, and to think that we can do this ourselves. It also is slower when you work with other people as well. And I think we can be quite impatient for wanting results and change to happen quickly, whereas I don't think actually lots of improvement work I think can take considerable amounts of
Mm.
time and patience, and working with people definitely slows things down, but I think it can have better impact in the end. And partly I think this comes back to networking and the
Mhm.
role of the network, because yes, it's partly to help people learn more and know where they can go for the information, but it's working together in collaboration with other people means that if you do have a project that works really well in your area, then you have a way that you can share it. If
Uh-huh.
you've tried to do something and it's gone terribly wrong, actually you really need those supportive people to say, to pick you up a little bit and go, oh yeah, I understand why that went wrong. It maybe it is worth still carrying on because that aspect of it was still useful, or you've had some setbacks but it's not the end of the project. So I think having those people around you can be really useful, and it's worth seeking out those people.
Yeah, I know when you first contacted me about doing this podcast, Joe, you mentioned, I think, that networking was a particular aspect that had caught your interest, and you'd got some models of networks and some things you'd sort of discovered along the way. Do you want to share some of that?
Yeah, so I think I became more involved in networks, probably a little bit selfishly, when I moved into being a neurophysio, and I felt like I needed to quickly upskill a little bit.
Mm.
And I became quite involved in NACPIN and the local network in the Midlands. And I got to go on conferences and meet a variety of people with that. But then I also realised that as a regional network, we needed to have new members joining. We needed to have members from different areas. And so I started sort of looking for the gaps in the network, like who was missing in the network? How would we encourage those people to come along? Did we need to change the times of our meetings? Did we need to change the way we were introducing new topics, or were we actually making sure that everyone was being listened to? And I quite like the work of June Holly. She talks about network weaving. Well, she's written quite a lot about network weaving as well. And she describes a network weaver as someone being someone who can connect the two people that have an interest. So maybe if you think of traditional networking, like I go to a conference, I like the speaker, I have a good chat with the speaker afterwards, and then I find someone else that I'm interested. So it's sort of me in the center with lots of little connections coming out. Whereas network weaving is a bit like finding two people who have then some a commonality or an interest, or you just think that they really have a similar sort of energy and they
Mm.
would work really well together, and bringing them together. And I might never find out what happens as the result of that connection or that relationship building, but it's there and it's happening, and it's enjoying making those sort of connections.
Yeah, I like the sound of that in that the weaving as opposed to the first networking process you described takes it further, or it may take it further away from you. And it's almost like you're creating a network for the process or the idea to develop in the best way it can, rather than maybe holding on to it if you're not the right person, um, and just being a little bit less attached to it, letting it find its own way really and its own solution, which again probably does slightly jar with our tendency to be used to managing problems in a very personal way and close to us. It might be quite challenging for some people to be able to kind of send it out a little bit further away from themselves.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely less controlling. And it's, I think, about trusting the process, but also trusting the people around you that they
Mm,
are capable and competent to pick up and carry on things with their own initiatives, uh, and that things might not, or outcomes might not happen straight away, but it's just laying the seeds and the foundations for maybe when something bigger does need to happen, or a group of people need to come together.
Yeah, I'm definitely smiling and recognizing, hopefully slightly more my younger self, but I totally identify with the impatience and the immediacy and the keeping it close. And yeah, these are definitely all good lessons, which hopefully I'm learning as I get older. But I do recognize the more typical traits you're describing. Just a slightly different tack on it, Joe. So, what's your opinion about the fact that there there are lots of organizations springing up with either a primary interest in ensuring quality or regulating, making sure that maybe a particular section of healthcare is improving. Lots and lots and lots, it seems, and it seems particularly since COVID that I don't know if there have been more of them or if it's just been easier to access them because of the internet. But I guess the point I'm just picking at a little bit is that maybe there's a slight concern that there are lots and lots of disparate groups working on very good things, but lots of crossover. Off the top of my head in MSK, I'm just thinking about, 2 or 3 versions of collecting patient data. And, they want the same aim with slightly different processes. But this is a very long-winded way of saying, do you think it's okay to have all these different organizations springing up? Do you think that's healthy? Is that a network in itself, or should we be trying to coalesce more? What's your thought?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it takes me back to like some of my psychology A level and thinking about groups of people and how many people can we really form meaningful connections with. And I think it's when you top about 50 that the groups need to separate into smaller groups, or maybe it's even slightly smaller than that. So I do think that there is still value in smaller networks coming together. I think it's a real shame when we're duplicating though, because
Yeah.
that just seems like unnecessary extra effort. You've got 3 groups doing exactly the same thing. And there, I think sometimes we need to have some humility and some letting go of egos to be like, there's so many things we can be doing in the world. Maybe we just need to let one group carry that forward, and either we can all help them with that, because I really absolutely hate duplication. And that is quite frustrating. Interestingly, I had some chats with a NHS librarian, and she was saying that when people come to her, like doing their research before they start a quality improvement project, really often she can find that the similar project has already been carried out before.
Mm.
So she was very much saying, like, when you have your idea, it is so important to do some research. And maybe sometimes outside the NHS, it's a little bit harder to, maybe without the support of people like librarians, to find out what is already happening. Because all of this takes effort. And we either want to learn from what projects have gone before and whether they've worked or whether they've failed so we can do them better, or to join forces together. So, but yeah, partly I think we should try and avoid duplication in networks and groups. But then I think to work effectively together, smaller groups are fine. I just hope that when bigger things come up, that the different networks can work together. So
Mm.
you've got like the Rehab Alliance, and people like that. So if there's a particular campaign, I think it's really nice that the different groups can then work together to jointly create something that's better.
Mm. Yes, that's a nice hope, isn't it? That yeah, people are beavering away on different things, but once something becomes a real kind of obvious headline topic to get behind, either everyone will get behind it, or as you say, one particular organization, it'll be apparent that they should be the ones to take it forward. I was reading just this morning, actually, on LinkedIn, Dr. Brendan Stubbs was slightly critical of this duplication in his world, which is promoting the benefits of physical activity, particularly in relation to mental health. And he was in the thread, actually, he was just having a conversation with somebody about whether the way things work in academia drives this duplication a little bit. And he was saying that there seem to be so many more systematic reviews and meta-analysis papers and less original research, which might be a sort of funding and effort thing. I suppose from your anecdote about the librarian, it may just be really difficult to find that thing that hasn't been done before. And when you start looking, you might think, oh gosh, well, there's so many, I'll do a systematic review first. But yeah, it would be nice to be getting some original data and critically the translation into practice more quickly, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it definitely would. And I think often when you look at those systematic reviews, when they've drilled down into the individual studies, they discount so many because of
Mm.
poor quality studies. You think, don't we need to be doing some good quality
Yeah.
studies to improve that data and the and the systematic reviews? Um, I do think you talked about implementing the evidence and
Mm.
implementing the research, and similar with quality improvement, to actually get things to be implemented for the change to work. There's always a social element to that as well.
Right.
So, say with a new treatment technique, it's the thing that's being talked about. Your peers are talking about it. Your line manager is asking or sending you on a course to go and learn about it. So I do think you need that social to consider the social element to change as well. If my friend recommends something, I'm far more likely to do it or to go on the course or be interested in it to if it's just a stranger I haven't heard about.
And that's where the network can be really powerful, isn't it?
Yeah,
In good
yeah,
and bad ways.
absolutely. Mm.
So, Joe, are there any particular projects that are coming up regularly or very popular? Are you noticing any particular headline topics within your networks?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm finding that people are quite interested in how they can use quality improvement to help address health inequalities. So in London, there's been a project, sort of ongoing pilot with Divya Narasimhan, who has been looking at the access to pulmonary rehab. And they were looking at who was there and who wasn't there. And they were finding things that people weren't even able to access the diagnostics. So they were looking at where they hold clinics. And one thing that came out about it as well that I thought was really fantastic was that they collaborated with Arsenal Football Club so that some of their actual rehab classes are run with the football coaches in the stadiums and in those spaces, which is where their population are used to going to compared to it maybe being in a hospital or in like a village hall. So I thought that was really interesting. And the process, though, of going and finding the people who weren't attending the classes or who weren't even being referred to the classes. So how do you even go about finding
Mm.
your patients that know about you? I thought that was a really interesting and complex problem. And I also know up north where the life expectancy in certain areas, it can be like 10 years less depending on which end of the bus route that you live on.
Wow.
And that's huge, isn't it?
Massive.
And just yeah. And how do you go about tackling that sort of thing? Looking at digital access, digital knowledge and skills. So I think there's a lot of work going on with the health inequalities because those are much trickier problems to solve. I think we used to call them wicked problems, the sort of problems that have multiple factors and
Mm.
that aren't just going to take a single initiative. And they're also the sort of problems that aren't going to be just you can't tackle them, say, just in the NHS or just in private healthcare or social care. It's really got to be those cross boundaries, cross organisational working to think about them and to tackle them together. So that's definitely one big area. The other big area is waiting lists. It's been really topical, hasn't it, after COVID, for
Mm.
all the elective recovery and managing the capacity and demand. So there's the initiatives like the Sussex Community Appointment Days, and I know there've then been areas that have managed to replicated that. But looking at that from a quality improvement perspective, they spent quite a while thinking, what did their patients need? They asked the question, what matters to me?
Yes.
Or well, what matters to you? They'd be
Mm.
asking their patients. And then they set up the days and invited people like district nurses and community organisations to come along. And that's been really successful. And in some other areas, it's been really successful as well. But then so I think one area in particular, it's not been so successful because they just took the idea of community appointment days and shifted it and dumped it into a different organisation. And actually, Sussex have been doing work on their culture and their processes over many years, and that is an important part of the change as well. So it's so much more about the process rather than the specific solution that was being used to address those. So I thought those
Yeah,
were
and I'm
quite
sure
interesting.
Sussex, sorry to interrupt you, I'm sure Sussex, if they'd done all that work, they would have such detailed knowledge of um, the kind of information you were referring to before. You know, where do people spend their lives? Um, what motivates them, what matters to them, the question. Yeah, and then to just sort of take that wholesale and put it in a totally different environment, it makes sense that it wouldn't work. Also, I think you talking about those scale of problems really makes sense of what you were talking about to start with about creating a network. I mean, when you look at a problem as monumental as health inequalities or waiting lists per se, then of course, to make it in any way effective and relevant, you're going to have to involve multiple different people and different organizations if it's going to be in any way successful. And also, yeah, you know, you were talking about timescales. That doesn't sound like a quick fix scenario. Um, yeah, and I'm smiling because actually the community appointment days, I've heard a little bit about them, and they do sound very appealing and in exactly the kind of personality trait that we were talking about at the start. My thought is, oh, that sounds great. I'll just do one through my clinic. And just hearing you talk in those few minutes there makes me take a step back and think, okay, what would that actually mean in my community? Or even
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Jack Chu. He has a clinic up in Manchester, and he has talked a little bit online about a very successful project he's done through his clinic called the Timperley Trundle, which is essentially a project to get the local community more mobile and based around local walks, but with lots of pre and post assessment tools. You know, it's quite an objective process. But even that is very tempting to just think, oh, that could work anywhere. But there'll be specifics about his demographic and the facilities he has available to deliver that service. And as you say, what people actually want in that area, which will be different to, say, mine. So, yeah, it's a lot more thought needs to go into things than perhaps is initially
Absolutely.
apparent.
Yeah. So thinking about just the Sussex community appointment days, we did do an event with the Q community, which is now on their YouTube channel. And Laura talks about that quite a lot, the process. If you are interested in finding out a bit more,
Okay.
that's quite an interesting watch to go through. What I also thought was interesting is they considered their staff members as well, members of the team, and asked them sort of what matters to you as a clinician working
Right.
in an environment where the waiting lists are just out of control. And it's really demoralizing to know that however hard you work, you're still seeing people after a 3 month or even worse 6 month waiting list, and
Yeah.
everyone's chronically in pain. And that actually gives quite a level of sort of moral distress as a clinician. So, in trying to change things and looking at the services they were offering, they were also taking into account what it felt like to work in that service as well.
Yeah, yes, I was my mind when you were talking before just was thinking about the clinician well-being side of it, and I wanted to pick up on that. So thank you for bringing it up as well. Yeah, I mean, do you know if there are any surprises in the answers to that question to clinicians? What matters to them?
Um, I think it was, my surprise is that they were asked
Yeah.
and they were listened to, because I can't think of times where I've necessarily been asked that, in relation to my overall workload and things like that. And I just thought it was really powerful in spending the time with talking to the members of staff as well. I think, yeah, but I don't think it was particularly surprising that I don't think anyone particularly likes working with long waiting lists when you know that you could be doing something better as well.
Mm.
Um, and I think over time that doesn't help with retaining members of staff either. So breaking up the day and breaking up the working pattern into a mix of things instead of just appointments straight after each other
Mm.
is really helpful. And I think we all feel better at work when we're happy with the quality of what we feel we're offering as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really good point. Yes. Yeah, flexibility if that's what you need, but also a sense that even if funds and resources are short, you are still in short supply, you're still delivering the best quality service you can with what's available. I'm sure that would be really high on the list for so many people. Joe, have you learned
Absolutely.
much about leadership, sort of management of teams through this work?
Yeah. So what's quite interesting through the work I'm doing at the moment, everyone that I'm working with is doing this as a voluntary effort. So it's very different to leading a team who are all employed, who will be meeting with me in a certain number of months for their appraisal. And we've agreed some objectives. And if things haven't been done, we might be having a good chat about why exactly things haven't been done. Whereas working with people who are all volunteering and giving up their time, it's yeah, it's very different because people don't have to do it. And if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. So it's creating that invitation to collaborate or to join in, and making it as easy for people as possible to be able to contribute. So trying not to ask too much of people because we don't want people burning out with being involved in too many different things and too many pressures on top of the day job. But then at the same time, I'm also quite aware that there is so much value from being involved in a network. So we were talking about social well-being, and actually people with networks to go to are much better supported in their day-to-day jobs, but also in their general like life well-being if you've got those sort of people that you can bounce ideas off or come with help or be supportive as well. So I really do think that the people who are involved in a network generally get as much out of it as they give to it as well.
Mm.
And I know I've certainly found that in my involvement in networks in the past, but it's a definite balance between sort of what can we manage to do working together as a discretionary effort, with what people's capacity is.
Yeah, yes, because when you first started talking about the fact that people don't have to do it and you've got to sort of make sure you don't ask too much and you've got to accommodate certain needs, I thought, gosh, that just sounds really hard. How do they ever actually pull it off? Because there's so many sort of loopholes there and difficult scenarios. But then when you were talking about the benefit side of things, that made more sense. Do you have to do you have to sell that much to people, or do they just realize through their involvement that they're going to get something back by being part of a network?
I've been thinking about that lately, and I don't think we sell it to people enough actually. Because as I started off talking about like being careful with people and not overburdening them, and I think that's what we sort of talk about a bit more. Whereas actually, there is so much positive stuff that comes out of being involved in a network.
Mm.
Even to be able to introduce an event on Teams is a little bit scary if you've not done it before.
Yeah.
And a lot of our sort of network online events are run online, and we ask people to do, say, different introducing it, or to do the Q&A with one of the speakers. And there are skills in being able to do that. So being able to do that in some slightly smaller ways and in really supportive environments. And when you've got people, you've maybe got someone else with you who's done it before. So if it starts to go a little bit wrong, you're not on your own and you can do this. I think that then feeds in very well to things that are maybe asked of people in their day job or as they go into more senior and leadership positions as well. So I think we need to be shouting about that a bit more
Mm.
with networks, and making it really clear that there are quite a lot of benefits.
Yeah. Do you feel, sort of talking about it, do you feel prompted to do a bit more of that, selling the benefits and shouting about them a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. If you watch our Twitter feed later today, I think I made a video a little while ago. I think I need to be sharing that more with everyone rather than just internally. 'Cause I think internally people are aware of the benefits, but I don't think we could definitely shout about that a bit more.
Yeah, I think I'm involved a little bit with Physio First, and I know they're doing increasing work to explain the benefits of being involved in an organisation. And you're right, you probably do, if you're naturally predisposed to getting involved in things, you're going to find out once you're actually in the network. But for people who perhaps it wouldn't be such a natural draw, then I think it'd be really helpful for them to hear those kind of things listed, particularly those skills you've just gone through, because they're things that probably wouldn't have been taught to us as undergraduates, but as the world changes and we all need to be more visible, there are certain skill sets, aren't there, that are very helpful to us, and it is much less scary to learn it alongside somebody else.
Yeah, yeah, completely. And it's so these little things that push us out of our comfort zone, once we do them, they become a bit more easier. Like today, coming on your podcast, it's really nice. And as I settle into it, I'm feeling more comfortable. And in future, if someone says, "Joe, will you come on a podcast?" it won't be such a huge, scary thing as I might have thought of it originally. So yeah, it's little pushes, little experiments, little bits of learning.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm glad you're feeling comfortable. You weren't showing any signs of not feeling it.
You're just a bit sweaty here.
We can't see that on the screen, don't worry. So, Joe, although it might not be a direct aim of your organisation, is there any possibility that by engaging with networks such as yours, people might be able to fulfil some of the standards that various regulatory bodies might require of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think about the CSP standards of professional values and behaviour, there's one around delivering effective service, and so putting the needs of service users at the centre of decision making and setting up services. And that's at the heart of lots of the principles of quality improvement work. And the quality improvement tools and methodology can give you the skills to do that a bit more than just a tick boxy exercise. And then also there's one of them about striving to achieve excellence and seeking to continuously improve. So actually, the things that we are required to do as healthcare professionals, networks such as the AHPs and quality improvement can help with that peer support and the signposting towards education as well, to be able to fill those criteria. And then there's also work that happens with AHPs as a whole. So at the moment, we're in under the plan or the strategy of AHPs Deliver. Part of that is to innovate. And so hopefully the network can give ideas, inspiration, and support about being able to do that. So I'd hope that being part of networks actually adds to your
Mm.
day-to-day job role, adds to your clinical practice and skills as well, rather
Yeah,
than taking
and
time.
the whole
Yeah.
process is reflective practice, isn't it? And I think, going back to conversation we had earlier, to a certain extent, it could fulfill a well-being standard as well. If delivering the service, like you said before, if delivering a quality service improves your own workplace and your sense of well-being within that workplace, and also allows for accommodation of things which will improve your well-being directly. Yeah, I can see there's loads of crossovers there. So, if people want to get involved, Joe, do people tend to come to you because they've got an idea of something they want to improve, or do they want to just be a part of the network and see what other people are working on? How does it work?
So we've got a workspace on NHS Futures, and when people join that, they always have to put a reason on why they're joining it. So that's quite interesting to see. And a lot of people join just because they're curious. Maybe as part of their work, they've been sent on a how to use PDSA cycles or something, just a little introduction into the world of QI. And they're like, oh, this is interesting. I'd like to know a bit more. So they join to be able to find out more. Some people come because they've maybe done a QI project and they want to be able to share it outside of their immediate area.
Mm.
And then that's really helpful as well. And then some people come because they really love QI and they want to be around people who are also interested, also experimenting with using it in different ways, and to learn and also to help other people as well. So sometimes we have more like senior leaders coming who are wanting to embed QI in their organization and looking at how they can do that.
Mm. And how would best people get hold of you? How would people best get hold of you if they did want to pursue one of those avenues?
Yeah, so we're on X or Twitter as it used to be known. We've got a bit of a spaghetti of letters. We're AHPQI on X. You can always drop us an email, which is alliedhealthqi@gmail.com. I'm sure Joe will pop it in the notes.
Yeah.
Um, And then we're also on Q Community as well. And so the Q Community is like the, I don't know, people community side of the Health Foundation. And that is a place to come and find us because we've got a special interest group, Allied Health Professionals in Quality Improvement. But it's also just a really interesting place for general healthcare and improvement.
Mm.
So, for example, there's a special interest group on storytelling, which is looking at the ways that we can humanize data and make it interesting when we're, I don't know, trying to get a grant for various funding or just wanting to use more than just numbers in our explanations. And there's also an interesting liberating structures group, so it's an interesting place to go and have a little explore of,
Mm.
but definitely click the join button for our group as well. We've
Perfect.
got an event in October. It's October the 10th on PDSA cycles, improve one thing. So if you either email us or go onto either of those groups, then you can find details about that.
Is that an
And that's a
online
nice
event, Joe?
1 hour. Yeah, so an online event for 1 hour, and it's run by Nikki Davies, who's fantastic. So it'll be an interesting one.
Already my interest is piqued. I love a lateral topic like storytelling. So that would definitely get me interested. And Joe, just finally, any ideas where this is taking you? You've obviously had quite a varied career and varied interests. You made references to A-level psychology and things like that. Any ideas where this might go for you?
Well, I hope to stay doing this a bit longer because now we've sort of got groups of people working together quite nicely and I've settled into the role a bit more. I hope to carry on to this. I'm not sure exactly what the future does hold for me at the moment. I'm open to opportunities and seeing what comes next. It's quite nice to have the opportunity to work flexibly. I've got 3 kids, so this works very nicely for my life at the moment.
And you've done that
Yes,
big
we'll
move to
see what happens
Cornwall,
next.
which must have, must be settling into that as well.
Absolutely, yes. I did enjoy doing a little bit of locum work down here. It's always quite nice to get to know your local healthcare and physios. So that was fun. So maybe a bit more of that in the future too.
Yeah. Oh, well, on behalf of AHPs, thank you for the work you're doing and for others involved in the organization. It sounds like um, a really well structured and thoughtful organization. And I think it's really good that you were able to list the benefits for people getting involved, even if they're not, pioneering some huge change or campaign or anything, but just I think at the very least being involved in quality improvement in a way that feels very positive and also directed rather than just because you're told to or from a place of fear that somebody might check what you're doing. It sounds like a really, really healthy approach to just making things better. So thank you so much for your work and please pass it on to the other people in your organization. And hopefully, having listened
Absolutely.
to the podcast, you'll get a few more people signing up and getting involved.
That would be great. Thanks ever so much for having me on here today, Joe. And I should say before I go that as I joined the organisation, I was so impressed with the way it was set up to be member led and to really be inclusive of everyone's opinions and setting the direction for it to go forward. So I am just building on the good work that had already happened.
Oh, good to hear. Thank you so much, Joe. Thanks for being a guest. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. So I'm really grateful to Joe for coming on and talking about quality improvement in perhaps a slightly more palatable way than some of us might have experienced it in the past. Joe has sent me all those details and complicated acronyms of how to get hold of her and learn more about the organisation. So perhaps if you have got an area of your service that you're interested in improving, or if you're just interested in getting involved in the organisation and seeing what things other people are doing, where they're having successes and where they're making mistakes that you might be able to avoid, then do get in touch with Joe or the network itself and see what's available. Okay, so if you are a busy clinician trying to improve things all over the place in all aspects of your life, then that is a great thing. And hopefully, some of the things Joe talked about today will help you in that process. But do remember that sometimes you don't have to be improving things, you are allowed to just be, because just as you are, you matter.